Now, how bad is income inequality these days? Well, according to the nation's leading trade union, pretty bad. Like, really bad. Now, according to a new online database that pretty much anybody can use, corporate executives are now taking in about 347 times the average worker salary. So, they're taking in 347 times more than the average worker. Jeez and Lord mercy. That is a lot of money. Now, this comes from the AFL-CIO, which is that major trade union, executive PayWatch. Now, it's a searchable online database that tracks CEO pay. Now, it found that the average CEO of an S&P 500 company made approximately $13.1 million in 2016. Whew. That is a lot of money, $13.1 million. In comparison, production and non-supervisory workers, the guys on the floor, right, who are doing the hard work, they earned $37,632 on average last year, according to this database. Now, that's a big, big, big difference, okay? And that doesn't include people who make minimum wage. See, $37,000 a year, if you're making $37,000 a year, you're actually not doing too bad. You're one of the fortunate ones. $37,000 a year roughly breaks down to about 19 something an hour. So you kind of round up like basically 20 bucks an hour. That's still a pretty decent amount of money. Okay. Look, a lot of people in the Rust Belt here, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, unless you're working at, Ford or GM or any of the big plants in Detroit, you are not making $20 an hour. I know I worked in the auto industry. I didn't even make anywhere close to $20 an hour. So, I mean, so what you have is you have people who make minimum wage or $9 an hour or $10 an hour versus those who make $13 an hour, $15 an hour versus people who make $20 an hour. And then you compare that to what the CEOs make. It can be pretty clear when you look at all that the CEOs are just crushing everybody. They're destroying everyone when it comes to wages. We have been left in the dust, workers. Sad. Now, this year's report, according to AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka, said this year's report provides further proof that the greed of corporate CEOs is driving America's income inequality crisis. And now, that is absolutely true. So, unfortunately, he said big corporations continue to find ways to rig the economy in their favor and line their CEOs' pockets at the expense of the workers who make their businesses run. Now, there is one of my favorite things to point out, stats to point out, is the workers' wage versus productivity chart. Basically, wages have flatlined, productivity has shot through the roof. Interesting, right? And there are other charts that you can compare that to versus like CEO pay and taxation on the wealthiest Americans, which has dropped. So there's a lot of different data points that you can compare to show that the CEOs, as their taxes have went down, wages have also went down, and yet CEO pay continues to increase as everybody else's standard of living tends to drop. So now this means, look, Americans are more productive than they ever have been, right? They're working harder. You guys are out there busting your asses every day, but you're not seeing any of the gains. You're not seeing anything from it. You're getting barely enough to pay the bills. I know, I've worked in the factories. I've been there before. I welded bumpers. I ran machines. I did plastic injection molds. It is hot, thankless work. And it deserves a decent living wage. Now, let me give you an example. I worked at a place that was capped at $11 an hour. That's it. You can't go any higher than $11 an hour. I don't know if that's changed, but that's pretty bad. And this, again, was related to the automotive industry. And it's very, very likely that people don't start out at $11 an hour. They start out at $8 an hour, $9 an hour, $10. And look, if productivity had kept up with inflation, workers would be making at least $22 an hour. So, and the problem here is that the companies seem to refuse to invest in their workers. A previous report found that, for example, during the last tax holiday, after large corporations stashed billions into their tax-free havens overseas, instead of paying their fair share in taxes, the Bush administration stupidly allowed them to bring back that money at a very, very low tax rate, as long as they promised to create jobs. Well, what happened? Well, they brought that money back, and then they fired people. They fired somewhere around 20,000 people from some of the top companies that got money back through repatriation. And then what they used the money for? If they didn't invest in their business, if they weren't creating jobs, what were they doing with the money? Well, they were doing stock buybacks. So they buy their own stock to inflate their own company's net worth, and then they could pay their executives even bigger bonuses. They don't invest in their workers. They don't increase wages. In fact, they do the opposite. They lobby in order to keep the minimum wage low, and then they also lobby to reduce their own taxes. So they're just hoarding that money. They're just keeping it to themselves. Now, of course, there are groups that represent these same large corporations. Well, they have an issue with this report. One of them is the so-called Center for Union Facts. Oh, I love this. Now, they claim that they analyzed these statistics in union disclosure forms, and they found that the U.S. executive only made $194,350. Not $13.1 million. Oh, see, look at that. Our CEOs are so underpaid. Look, they're only making almost $200,000. So underpaid. How dare you say that they made $13.1 million? Does that include things like stock buybacks or stock options and other perks? Because look, there are CEOs that have found ways in order to dodge income taxes by taking small cash salaries, right? And just having all of their stuff tied up in stocks, bonds, and things that would give them a dividend. Now, stuff like that gets taxed at a lower rate than just straight up income. So, there's that. Now, the group further claimed that it's not just the CEOs that are actually making money. No, it's not the CEOs that are doing well. It's actually the union bosses. Those big, bad union bosses taking all that money. In fact, according to their counter study, 192 union presidents made more than CEOs on average. Center for Union Facts spokesman Luca Lawton called the AFL-CIO's findings, quote, misleading. By attacking business leaders with cherry-picked data, labor leaders are glossing over their own startling pay discrepancies. The AFL-CIO and its affiliated unions would be better off figuring out how to effectively serve their disgruntled members than scoring cheap PR points. Now, I love how this group says, look away, look away, look away. It's the union's fault. It's on the unions. It's their fault. They're actually making more money than our poor, embattled CEOs. Look, man, let me show you the difference between a union and a non-union shop. Because I've worked in both, okay? Now, in a union shop, I was paid better. And I was actually treated better by management because I actually had a voice and a stake in the company. When I worked in a non-union shop, I was actually paid less and treated like shit, like a disposable cog. There's kind of your difference. There's a respect thing. When you're in a union shop, you actually get respected as a worker. I know, it's crazy. Because it turns out unions are helpful to workers and they actually hold management accountable. It's supposed to be a place where or a collection of people that stand up and argue for fair wages and have that kind of power to bargain. That's the whole point, to collectively bargain. Now, a lot of workers, a lot of, sorry, not workers, but a lot of companies, most companies, they hate that. They're like, ooh, no, we do not want to negotiate with you as a force because you can actually stand up to us. But if it's you on your own without a union, well, we can crush you and we can fire you and you will have no recourse. They hate unions. Now, this group, the Center for Union Facts, they go on this attack. Oh, look at how much Richard Trumka makes. Oh, man, he's making $250,000, $300,000 a year. Get him. He's making more than the CEOs. But more importantly, he's making more than you. You got to go after him. It's clearly divide and conquer. You're trying to turn workers against unions so the big companies can do no more to pick your pockets. It's the oldest trick in the book. Don't fall for it. That and conflating big business, which obviously do have the advantages, versus small businesses that do not. Okay, they're trying to conflate the two. Big business is small business is big business. They're all getting crushed. No, the S&P 500, they looked at that, and the average is 13.1 million. You're not in the S&P 500 unless you're actually a very big business and you're making a lot of money. Now, it turns out that small businesses are the ones that are getting their asses kicked. They're stuck paying the taxes that big multinational corporations can skip out of. A lot of small businesses also try to pay their workers well. And look, understandably, some are not able to. Some cannot. But these companies, the big companies, these giant corporations, they have no excuse. If your CEO is bringing home more than 350 times what your workers are making, and you're stashing your money overseas, and then you're buying congressmen to make that kind of shit legal, to lower your own taxes, well, then you exemplify the greed that has been destroying America. See, without fair tax rates, higher taxes on the wealthiest Americans, and lower taxes for the people in the lower brackets, strong unions, and strong labor laws, well, this disparity is going to continue to grow and grow until it gets out of control. And it's going to have some very negative effects. We've already seen them here in America. High unemployment, increased strain on social safety nets, bigger government debts and deficits, sagging sales for companies, lower economic growth. That's the stuff that we're seeing in America right now. We're seeing that all today. But there was a time in America where we had lower inequality and we actually had a better economy. That was back in the 1950s and 60s. Ironically, when conservatives say, oh, what a golden age, what a wonderful age, we should go back to that. Okay, let's go back to those tax rates where we had marginal taxes, 70%. In some cases, there a little bit of period of time where it was up to 90%. Now, I have to mention that is marginal tax rates. And also on the very, very, very wealthiest percentage of Americans. The people with the obscene amount of wealth. Anything above a certain amount, a certain point of income, any dollar above that would be taxed at 90%. It's not like they come and take you're sitting at home, you're a middle class person, you're working your ass off. They take 90% of your paycheck. That's ridiculous. Anybody who tells you that is lying to your face or doesn't understand how marginal tax rates actually work. When they do this, when they have those high marginal tax rates, lots and lots of different brackets, and they tax people according to their ability to pay in a progressive tax system, well, that actually helps the economy. That actually helps, it helps investment. They'll take what's left, they'll invest in their business because they want to grow their business instead of having it taxed. They're not going to hide it overseas. Okay, they're actually going to invest in their workers. Because it turns out that when you do that, you actually have happier, more productive workers. And if you put money in the pockets of regular people, well, they're going to spend that money. It's going to go back into the economy instead of hoard it. And unfortunately, that's what we have going on today. We have low tax rates, and we still have companies hoarding money overseas. It's not going back in the economy. And you're having a middle class that is stagnating, and you're having a poorer class, working class, that has gotten even poorer. This is the problem here. Okay? Sweden did the right thing. Sweden actually is doing the opposite of what we're doing right now, and their economy is booming. What we're doing right now today is wrong. We shouldn't be lowering taxes on giant corporations. We should be raising them. And I'm not saying anything crazy like 70 to 90%, but we should be raising them, not talking about lowering them. The Trump administration wants to slash corporate taxes to 15%. Why? So they can hoard more money? Ridiculous. It's not going to work. You can't cut your way to prosperity. No, we have to fix this system. Okay? We have to do the opposite of what we're doing so that working people, working families can get a bigger slice of the pie that they actually work for. It's good for the workers. It's good for society. And it's even good for some of the companies because more money in people's pockets equals more business, equals more sales. And so at some point, taxes are going to be so low for the rich. And it's going to basically starve the middle class and the poor of revenue of the money that they actually need to buy stuff. And then they can't afford to buy that stuff. Well, what are companies going to do when people can't afford their products? They're not going to be in business much anymore. So we've got to fix this. We have to fix this system before it gets... look, we're already past a point, I think, where we should have had this fixed years ago. But it's not too late. We can still reduce the levels of income inequality so that we can have a more fair, a more equitable distribution of wealth in this country. And trust me, that's going to be good for everybody. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.